In the annals of human history, few inventions have been as sinister and horrifying as the gas vans developed by Nazi Germany during World War II. These mobile killing machines, designed to efficiently murder large numbers of people, represent a dark chapter in the evolution of genocide technology. Their origins can be traced back to the early days of the Nazi regime's efforts to eliminate those deemed unworthy of life. As Adolf Hitler himself chillingly declared in a 1939 memo authorizing the euthanasia program, Reichsleiter Bouhler and Dr. Brandt are charged with the responsibility for expanding the authority of physicians to the end that patients considered incurable can be granted a mercy death. The story of the gas vans begins in the late 1930s with the T4 euthanasia program, named after its headquarters at Tiergartenstrasse 4 in Berlin. This program, initiated by Hitler himself, aimed to eliminate individuals with physical and mental disabilities. Initially, the victims were killed through lethal injections or starvation. However, these methods proved too slow and emotionally taxing for the perpetrators. Dr. Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal physician and a key figure in the T4 program, later testified at the Nuremberg trials. The Führer's order was to be carried out in the most humane way possible. This perverse interpretation of humane would lead to increasingly efficient methods of mass murder. In the autumn of 1939, Hitler's chancellery ordered the development of a more efficient killing method. This task fell to chemist Albert Widmann and SS officer Arthur Neber. Widmann suggested using engine exhaust gases rich in carbon monoxide as a means of asphyxiation. Neber, drawing inspiration from his own near-death experience with car exhaust fumes, proposed the idea of using vehicle engines as a source of lethal gas. Neber had accidentally poisoned himself with car exhaust in his garage and saw the potential for weaponizing this common occurrence. The first experiments took place in December 1939 at Brandenburg Prison. A small brick building was converted into a gas chamber with carbon monoxide pumped in from pressurized tanks. This method, while effective, was soon deemed too cumbersome and expensive for large-scale operations. Victor Brack, one of the main organizers of the T4 program, later described these early experiments. "We began with carbon monoxide gas in bottles, but that was very complicated and not very mobile. In January 1940, a breakthrough occurred when Karl Brandt oversaw an experiment at the former prison in Brandenburg an der Havel. 20 patients from nearby asylums were locked in a sealed room, into which carbon monoxide was introduced. All 20 died within minutes. This success led to the widespread adoption of gas chambers in various euthanasia centers across Germany and Austria. One nurse who witnessed these early killings, Elisabeth Hecker, later recalled, "The cries of the victims were terrible. They knew what was happening to them." However, the fixed gas chambers had limitations. They were stationary, required significant infrastructure, and their existence was difficult to conceal from the local population. It was in this context that the idea of mobile gas chambers began to take shape. The need for secrecy was paramount, as evidenced by a note from SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich in 1941. "The Führer has ordered that the euthanasia program be extended to the east, but it must be done in absolute secrecy." The development of the first gas vans is credited to SS Untersturmführer Dr. Albert Widmann, chief chemist of the Criminal Technical Institute of the Reich Criminal Police Office. In September 1941, Widmann was summoned to a meeting in Minsk by Arthur Neber, who was seeking a more efficient method of killing mental patients. Neber proposed the idea of using exhaust fumes from vehicles. This meeting took place in the context of the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, which had begun just months earlier on June 22, 1941. The Eastern Front would become the primary testing ground for these new killing methods. The first crude experiments were conducted in Mogilev, Belarus. Neber and Widmann used a car with a hose attached to the exhaust pipe, directing the fumes into a sealed room where 2 mental patients had been placed. The victims died within minutes. Encouraged by these results, they proceeded to test the method on a larger scale. Widmann later testified about these experiments. "Neighbor said to me, 'Now we have the solution to our problem. We'll kill them with exhaust gas.'" A few days later, they conducted another experiment using a van. 25 mental patients were locked in the cargo compartment, and the exhaust fumes were redirected inside. This test proved even more successful, with all victims dying rapidly. A local SS officer, Heinrich Eberhard, who witnessed the experiment, described it in horrifying detail. "The screams lasted about 10 minutes, then all was quiet." Obersturmbannführer Walter Rauff, head of the RSHA's Reich Security Main Office Technical Department, oversaw the production and deployment of these vehicles. By June 1942, 20 gas vans were in operation, primarily in occupied territories of the Soviet Union and at the Chelmno extermination camp in occupied Poland. Rauff's dedication to the project was evident in a memo he wrote in 1942. "The technical adjustments to the vans are proceeding according to plan. I foresee no difficulties in meeting our deadlines." The use of gas vans represented a significant shift in the Nazi killing process. They allowed for greater mobility and secrecy compared to fixed gas chambers. The vans could be driven directly to locations where victims were gathered, such as ghettos or transit camps. Once loaded with victims, the van would be driven to a remote location, often a pre-dug mass grave, where the bodies would be unloaded and buried. SS Oberscharführer Walter Burmeister, who operated gas vans in the Worthegau region, later testified, "We could clear out a ghetto in a day with these vans. It was efficient, but the work was gruesome." The machinery of despair, inside Nazi Germany's mobile death chambers. In the annals of human atrocity, few inventions stand as stark reminders of calculated cruelty as the gas vans developed by Nazi Germany during World War II. These mobile killing machines, born from the twisted minds of SS officers and chemists, represent a chilling confluence of automotive engineering and genocidal intent. To understand the mechanics of these vehicles is to peer into the abyss of human depravity. At first glance, these vans appeared unremarkable. Based on existing truck models such as the Opel Blitz, Diamond T, Renault and Sora, they were designed to blend in with ordinary traffic. The exterior betrayed no hint of the horrors that unfolded within. This deliberate camouflage was part of the Nazi strategy of deception, allowing the vans to operate in plain sight. SS Obersturmbannführer Walter Rauff, who oversaw the production of these vans, referred to them in official documents as Sonderwagen, special vehicles, or S-Wagen, further obscuring their true purpose. The true nature of these vehicles lay in their carefully engineered interiors. The cargo compartment, typically measuring about 5.8 meters long, 1.7 meters wide, and 1.9 meters high, was hermetically sealed to prevent any gas from escaping. The floors were often lined with wooden grates, beneath which a metal pan was installed to collect bodily fluids, a gruesome necessity that speaks to the clinical efficiency of the design. SS Scharführer August Becker, who was tasked with inspecting the gas vans, wrote in a report, "The men complain about headaches after each unloading. Nevertheless, they do not wish to change the procedure, as they fear the prisoners might attempt to escape." The key to the van's lethal function was its modified exhaust system. A pipe, usually about 58 millimeters in diameter, connected the engine's exhaust to the sealed cargo area. This pipe was fitted with a hand-operated valve, allowing the driver to redirect the toxic fumes into the compartment at will. The carbon monoxide-rich exhaust would quickly fill the space, suffocating those trapped inside. Dr. August Becker, who inspected the gas vans, noted in a May 1942 report that the persons to be executed are not conscious of what is happening to them. The hitherto used method of killing has apparently not made too ugly an impression on the executioners. SS Obersturmbannführer Walter Rauff, head of the RSHA's technical department, oversaw the production of these vans. In a chilling memo dated June 5, 1942, he discussed technical adjustments to improve their efficiency. To facilitate cleaning, a tightly closable drain about 200 mm in diameter should be fitted to the floor. The drainage hole should be fitted with a slanting trap so that fluid liquids can drain off during the operation. This clinical language, discussing the murder of human beings as if it were a mere technical problem, illustrates the dehumanization inherent in the Nazi killing process. The process of using these vans was a study in systematic brutality. Victims, often told they were being relocated, would be directed to enter the van's cargo area. In some cases, such as at the Chelmno extermination camp, which began operations on December 8, 1941, they were told the vans would take them to delousing showers. Once loaded, often with 50 to 70 people crammed into the space, the doors would be sealed shut. Mordecai Podchlebnik, one of the few survivors of Chelmno, later testified, "They told us we were going to labor camps, but when I saw the vans, I knew it was the end." The driver, usually accompanied by a co-driver, would then start the engine. As the van began to move, the hand-operated valve would be opened, allowing the lethal exhaust fumes to flood the cargo area. The van would typically be driven to a predetermined disposal site, often a mass grave, during which time the victims inside would succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning. The duration of this deadly journey varied. According to testimonies from SS personnel, it could take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes for all the victims to die, depending on the load and the condition of the engine. SS Scharführer Walter Burmeister, who operated gas vans in the Wortergau region, later testified, "The screams from inside would gradually diminish, and after about 15 minutes, all would be quiet." Upon reaching the disposal site, the bodies would be unloaded. This grim task often fell to Jewish Sonderkommando units, forced to assist in the disposal of their own people under threat of death. The bodies, often tangled and soiled, presented a horrific sight. Simon Srebnik, one of only 2 known survivors of Chelmno, recalled, "When the doors opened, it was impossible to separate the bodies. They formed a single mass, each person clawing at the other in their final moments." The psychological trauma inflicted on these Sonderkommando members was immense, with many struggling with guilt and trauma long after the war. However, the gas vans were not without their problems. The high pressure required to pump the exhaust fumes into the sealed compartment often caused leaks, sometimes poisoning the drivers. There were also issues with the disposal of bodies, as the cargo doors were not large enough for quick unloading. These technical difficulties led to ongoing modifications and improvements. In a letter dated June 5, 1942, SS Untersturmführer Dr. August Becker complained about these issues, writing, "The vans in groups D and C can be loaded with 9-10 people per square meter. The large Saurer special vans, however, cannot be so fully utilized. The problem is not one of overloading, but of off-road maneuverability on all terrains." One particularly gruesome aspect of the gas van's design was the impact of the killing process on the victims' bodies. The combination of extreme heat, toxic gases, and the desperate struggle for survival often resulted in the expulsion of bodily fluids and excrement. This necessitated the inclusion of the aforementioned drainage systems and made the task of body disposal even more harrowing for those forced to carry it out. SS Unterscharführer Hubert Gomerski, who worked at the Chelmno camp, later described the scene upon opening the van doors. "The stench was unbearable. Many had voided their bowels. It was a horrific sight." The psychological toll on the operators of these vans was significant. Many SS men complained of headaches and nightmares. Some requested transfers to other duties. In response, efforts were made to distance the operators from the actual killing process. For example, in some later models, the pipe connecting the exhaust to the cargo area was disguised as a refrigeration unit, allowing drivers to maintain a cognitive distance from their lethal actions. SS Oberscharführer Walter Burmeister later admitted, "The work was gruesome. I often drank schnapps to cope with it." By the end of 1942, an estimated 20 to 30 gas vans were in operation across Nazi-occupied territories. They were particularly prevalent in areas of the Soviet Union, where the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units, were active. The exact number of victims killed by these mobile gas chambers is difficult to determine, but estimates range from 500,000 to 700,000 people. The gas vans represent a dark chapter in the evolution of Nazi killing technology. They bridged the gap between the early, more hands-on methods of mass murder and the industrialized killing of the large death camps. Their development and use underscore the lengths to which the Nazi regime went to make genocide more efficient and less psychologically taxing on the perpetrators. As historian Christopher Browning noted in his book, Ordinary Men, the gas van was a technological solution to the perceived problem of the psychological burden placed on the killers. Wheels of Death, the gas van's gruesome journey through Eastern Europe. As the Nazi war machine rolled eastward in the summer of 1941, it brought with it not just soldiers and tanks, but a new mobile instrument of mass murder. The gas vans, these rolling chambers of death, would soon leave an indelible mark on the blood-soaked landscape of Eastern Europe. The first significant deployment of gas vans occurred in the occupied Soviet territories. In late 1941, as the Einsatzgruppen found themselves increasingly strained by the psychological toll of mass shootings, the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, in Berlin, dispatched the first gas vans to Einsatzgruppe C, operating in Ukraine. These mobile killing units, initially designed to target the mentally ill, were now repurposed for the wholesale murder of Jews, Roma, and anyone deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. SS Obersturmbannführer Dr. Albert Widmann, the chemist who helped develop the gas vans, would later testify at his trial. The psychological burden on our men was to be reduced in this way. One of the earliest recorded uses of gas vans in the East was in Poltava, Ukraine, in November 1941. Here, SS Obersturmbannführer Paul Blobel, commander of Sonderkommando 4A, oversaw the gassing of Jews rounded up from the local ghetto. Survivors recounted the terror of being herded into what appeared to be ordinary trucks, only to realize too late the horrifying truth. As the engines roared to life and exhaust fumes flooded the sealed compartment, screams and desperate pounding on the metal walls gradually faded into an eerie silence. One survivor, Mikhail Gerasimov, who managed to escape before being loaded into a van, later recalled, "The sound of those engines starting, it was like hearing death itself approach." In Serbia, the gas vans found particularly gruesome employment. SS Gruppenführer Harold Turner, the head of the German military administration in Serbia, wrote in a report dated April 11, 1942, "Already some months ago, I shot dead all the Jews I could get my hands on in this area, concentrated all the Jewish women and children in a camp, and with the help of the SD got my hands on a delousing van that in about 14 days to 4 weeks will have brought about the definitive clearing out of the camp." This delousing van was, in fact, a gas van, and it was used to murder thousands of Jewish women and children at the Semlin concentration camp near Belgrade. The camp commandant, SS Untersturmführer Herbert Andorfer, later testified that the van would make 3 to 4 trips daily, each time carrying 50 to 80 victims to their deaths in a nearby forest. The largest-scale deployment of gas vans in Eastern Europe occurred at the Chelmno extermination camp in occupied Poland. Established on December 8, 1941, Chelmno was the first Nazi extermination camp to begin operations, predating even Auschwitz-Birkenau in its implementation of industrialized killing. Here, gas vans were the primary method of murder. Between December 1941 and April 1943, an estimated 152,000 people, primarily Jews from the Lodz ghetto and surrounding areas, were killed at Chelmno. The camp used 3 gas vans, including 2 Renault models and 1 larger Magirus Deutz truck, which could hold up to 150 victims at a time. SS Hauptscharführer Walter Burmeister, who served at Chelmno, later provided chilling testimony about the camp's operations. The Jews were told that they were to be resettled and had to take a bath for reasons of hygiene. They were led to the gas van, which they were told would take them to the bathhouse. When the doors were shut, The driver started the engine. The exhaust fumes poured into the interior of the van. After about 10 minutes, the cries and hammering on the sides of the van stopped. Burmeister's matter-of-fact description belies the horror of the scene he witnessed day after day. The efficiency of the gas vans at Chelmno was a point of macabre pride for the Nazi administrators. In a report dated May 16, 1942, SS Untersturmführer Dr. August Becker noted, "Since December 1941, for example, 97,000 have been processed using 3 vans, without any faults occurring in the vehicles." This clinical language, reducing mass murder to a matter of mechanical efficiency, underscores the dehumanizing nature of the Nazi killing apparatus. It's worth noting that Becker's role was to inspect and improve the efficiency of the gas vans, a task he approached with chilling enthusiasm. Survivors' testimonies paint a harrowing picture of the process. Simon Srebnick, one of only 2 known survivors of Chelmno, later recalled, "When the doors of the van opened, black smoke poured out. The bodies were all intertwined. It was impossible to separate them." Another survivor, Mordecai Podchlebnik, described the deception used. "They told us we were going to work camps, but when I saw the vans, I knew it was the end." In the occupied Soviet territories, the gas vans were often used in conjunction with more traditional Einsatzgruppen killing methods. For instance, in Krasnodar, southern Russia, Sonderkommando 10 used gas vans to murder patients from local psychiatric hospitals before turning their attention to the Jewish population. On August 21, 1942, they used gas vans to kill all 214 patients at the Berezanka Psychiatric Hospital near Nikolaev, Ukraine. Survivor testimony from Krasnodar paints a harrowing picture of the confusion and terror that accompanied these operations. One witness, Maria Kotova, recounted, "People were told they were being evacuated, but when the truck started moving, we heard terrible screams, then silence. It was a silence that still haunts me to this day." The psychological impact on the perpetrators themselves was significant. Many SS men found the use of gas vans less personally taxing than face-to-face shootings, but the aftermath of the gassings, unloading and disposing of the bodies remained a horrific task. SS Oberscharführer Theodor Malzmüller, who operated gas vans in the Crimea, later testified, "The corpses were all lying higgledy-piggledy in the van. It was a horrible sight. The faces were distorted, and some had turned blue." This grim reality led to high rates of alcoholism and mental breakdowns among the SS personnel involved in these operations. SS Unterscharführer Hubert Gomerski, who worked at Chelmno, admitted, "Many of us drank heavily to forget what we had seen and done." In Yugoslavia, the use of gas vans took on a particularly sinister character. Not only were they used to murder Jews and Roma, but also to eliminate political prisoners and partisans. In a report from May 9, 1942, SS Standartenführer Emanuel Schaefer boasted about the successful use of a gas van to execute imprisoned communists. The special vehicle gas van has proved itself to be very useful. In a relatively short time, the matter of the arrested communists was settled in a way which, formally, would have required weeks. The gas van in question, operated by the local Gestapo in Belgrade, was used to murder an estimated 8,000 people, primarily Jewish women and children from the Semlin camp, between March and May 1942. The deployment of gas vans across Eastern Europe was not without its logistical challenges. The harsh terrain and poor road conditions often led to mechanical failures. In one particularly gruesome incident near Minsk in early 1942, a gas van broke down mid-operation. The SS guards, unwilling to release the victims or wait for repairs, resorted to shooting the trapped occupants through holes hastily drilled in the van's sides. SS Obersturmführer Hans Truhe, who witnessed the incident, later recalled, "It was a scene of utter chaos and panic. The screams of the victims as they realized what was happening. It was unbearable." As the war progressed, and the Nazi regime shifted towards the use of stationary gas chambers in purpose-built death camps, the role of gas vans diminished but did not disappear entirely. They continued to be used in mobile operations, particularly in clearing smaller ghettos and targeting remote communities. For example, in the spring of 1944, gas vans were used to murder the remaining Jews of Kovel in Ukraine. Yitzhak Arad, a historian and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "The last Jews of Kovel were gassed in vans on a bridge over the Turia River. Their bodies were dumped directly into the water." In the final months of the war, as Soviet forces advanced westward, some gas vans were used in desperate attempts to eliminate evidence of Nazi crimes, including the murder of remaining prisoners and Sonderkommando members. At the Soldau concentration camp in East Prussia, now Dziadowo, Poland, SS guards used a gas van to kill the last 400 inmates in January 1945, just days before the camp's liberation. As the Red Army closed in, the SS attempted to destroy evidence of the van's existence, but parts of it were later discovered by Soviet investigators. Exhaust fumes and exhibits: the haunting journey of Nazi gas vans from killing fields to courtrooms. In the somber aftermath of World War II, as the world grappled with the full horror of the Nazi regime's atrocities, the sinister spectre of the gas vans emerged from the shadows of history to haunt the halls of justice. These mobile chambers of death, once tools of genocide, now became damning evidence in courtrooms across Europe and beyond. The legacy of the gas vans, etched in cold steel and toxic fumes, would play a crucial role in bringing some of the Third Reich's most notorious criminals to account. The Nuremberg trials, which began on November 20th, 1945, marked the first time that the international community sought to hold the architects of Nazi Germany's crimes accountable. While the gas vans were not the central focus of these proceedings, their existence and use were presented as evidence of the systematic nature of the Nazi extermination program. On January 3, 1946, Soviet prosecutor L.N. Smirnov introduced a chilling report detailing the development and deployment of the gas vans. The courtroom fell silent as he read aloud. In order to achieve death rapidly, the German fascist murderers used exhaust gas containing carbon monoxide, which was directed into the enclosed body of the murder van. The report Smirnov presented included technical specifications of the vans, detailing how they were modified to redirect exhaust fumes into the sealed cargo compartment. It also mentioned the various models used, including the Diamond T, Saurer, and Magirus Deutz trucks. The prosecution emphasized that these were not isolated incidents, but part of a coordinated effort, with gas vans deployed from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The testimony of SS Obergruppenführer Otto Ohlendorf, commander of Einsatzgruppe D, provided one of the most striking moments of the trials. On January 3, 1946, Ohlendorf matter-of-factly described the use of gas vans in his unit's operations in the occupied Soviet territories. The actual killing was done by gas vans. These vehicles were used to kill women and children. The victims were made to enter the vehicles, the doors were closed, and the gas was let in through the starting of the motor. His clinical description of mass murder sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. Ohlendorf's testimony was particularly chilling as he detailed the use of gas vans in specific operations. He recounted how, in December 1941, his Einsatzgruppe used gas vans to murder over 700 Jews in Simferopol, Crimea. The victims, including many women and children, were told they were being resettled. Instead, they were driven to anti-tank ditches outside the city, where they met their gruesome fate. While the Nuremberg trials brought high-ranking Nazi officials to justice, subsequent trials focused on those directly involved in the operation of the gas vans. The Einsatzgruppen trial, held in Nuremberg from September 29, 1947 to April 10, 1948, specifically addressed the mobile killing units that had used gas vans extensively. Here, the prosecution presented not only witness testimony, but also tangible evidence: blueprints of the van's deadly modifications, photographs of the vehicles, and even fragments of the metal tubing used to redirect exhaust into the sealed compartments. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence was a set of photographs taken by SS Untersturmführer Walter Gerlach in Mogilev, Belarus, in 1942. These images showed a gas van in operation, including disturbing shots of victims' bodies being unloaded. The photographs, discovered by Allied forces in 1945, provided irrefutable proof of the gas van's existence and use. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a letter dated June 5, 1942, from SS Untersturmführer Dr. August Becker to SS Obersturmbannführer Walter Rauff, head of the RSHA's technical department. Becker, who had been tasked with inspecting and improving the efficiency of the gas vans, wrote, "The vans in Groups C and D could have been camouflaged as house trailers by mounting on them one set of window shutters on each side of the small van and two on each side of the larger vans. The vehicles are well known to the authorities and the civilian population, who refer to them as death vans." This letter not only confirmed the existence and widespread use of the gas vans, but also revealed the callous bureaucracy behind their deployment. The letter went on to detail technical improvements Becker suggested, including the installation of a light that would indicate when the air in the van had become lethal. He also recommended reducing the cargo space to improve efficiency, writing, "The persons to be executed suffer death from suffocation and not death by dozing off as was planned." The clinical language of the letter, discussing mass murder in terms of technical efficiency, horrified many in the courtroom. The Chelmno trials, held in Lodz, Poland, from March 17 to April 17, 1963, brought to light the horrific details of the gas van's use at the Chelmno extermination camp. Survivors and former SS guards provided harrowing testimony about the camp's operations. Walter Burmeister, a former SS guard, described the process. Once the doors were shut, the driver would start the engine. The carbon monoxide would be directed into the interior of the van. After about 10 minutes, when the cries had stopped, the van was driven to the forest camp. The court was presented with a model of the Chelmno gas van, its innocuous exterior belying its deadly purpose. Survivor Szymon Srebrenik, who was only 13 when imprisoned at Chelmno, provided particularly moving testimony. He described how the SS would trick victims into entering the vans by telling them they were being taken to work. Srebrenik recalled, "We heard them singing. They were singing Hatikva, the Jewish anthem, as the doors closed." His words brought home the human tragedy behind the clinical descriptions of the gas van's operations. In the decades following these initial trials, efforts to bring Nazi war criminals to justice continued. The case of Alois Brunner, Adolf Eichmann's right-hand man who had overseen the use of gas vans in Vienna, became emblematic of the challenges in prosecuting Nazi fugitives. Brunner, who fled to Syria after the war, was tried in absentia by France in 1954 and sentenced to death. Despite numerous attempts to extradite him, Brunner remained at large until his presumed death in Damascus in 2010, a stark reminder of the elusive nature of justice for many Holocaust victims. Brunner's case highlighted the international nature of both the crimes and the pursuit of justice. In 1961, Germany issued an arrest warrant for Brunner for his role in deporting 43,000 Jews from Vienna in 1941 to 1942, many of whom were killed in gas vans. In 1980, an East German court sentenced him to life in prison in absentia. Despite these efforts, Brunner lived out his days in Syria, reportedly under the protection of the Assad regime. The legacy of the gas vans extended beyond the courtroom, influencing how future generations would remember and understand the Holocaust. Museums and memorial sites across Europe and Israel incorporated information about the gas vans into their exhibitions. The Yad Vashem Holocaust History Museum in Jerusalem, opened in 2005, features a section dedicated to the mobile killing units, including a replica of a gas van. Visitors can peer into the van's interior, confronting the claustrophobic horror that victims faced in their final moments. At Yad Vashem, the gas van exhibit is part of a larger narrative about the evolution of Nazi killing methods. It stands as a chilling bridge between the face-to-face killings of the Einsatzgruppen and the industrialized murder of the death camps. The museum also houses an extensive archive of documents related to the gas vans, including copies of the Becker letter and other RSHA communications about their deployment. Education initiatives have also played a crucial role in preserving the memory of the gas vans and their victims. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. includes the gas vans in its comprehensive educational programs. In a particularly poignant initiative, the museum partnered with Google Earth to create virtual tours of Holocaust sites, including locations where gas vans were used, allowing students and researchers worldwide to engage with this history in a new and immersive way. The museum's Some Were Neighbors exhibition, which explores the role of ordinary people in the Holocaust, includes a section on the drivers of gas vans. It poses challenging questions about individual responsibility and the nature of complicity, encouraging visitors to reflect on how they might have acted in similar circumstances. The preservation of physical evidence has been another vital aspect of the gas van's legacy. In 2009, German authorities announced the discovery of a Nazi gas van near the former Chelmno extermination camp. The rusted vehicle, found buried in a forest, provided tangible proof of the horrors described in survivor testimonies and court documents. Its excavation and subsequent preservation offered a grim but necessary reminder of the reality of these mobile killing machines. The discovery of the Chelmno gas van was the result of painstaking research by Polish historian Łukasz Paulika Nowak. Using wartime aerial photographs and survivor testimonies, Paulika Nowak pinpointed the likely location of the buried van. The excavation revealed a Magirus Deutz truck chassis with modifications consistent with its use as a gas van. This physical evidence provided a powerful counterpoint to Holocaust deniers who had long questioned the existence of such vehicles. As time passes and the number of Holocaust survivors dwindles, the importance of documenting and remembering the atrocities committed using gas vans has only grown. Historians and educators continue to grapple with how to convey the enormity of this aspect of the Holocaust to new generations. Dr. Wendy Lower, a prominent Holocaust historian, emphasized this challenge in a 2018 lecture. The gas vans represent a particularly insidious form of killing, mobile, efficient, and designed to be hidden in plain sight. Understanding their use is crucial to comprehending the full scope of the Nazi genocide. Dr. Lower's work has been instrumental in bringing attention to the often overlooked role of gas vans in the Holocaust. Her research has focused on the use of gas vans in Ukraine, particularly in the city of Zhytomyr. She has uncovered evidence of gas van operations, not just against Jews, but also against psychiatric patients and Roma people, highlighting the broad scope of Nazi genocidal policies. As we close this chapter of history, the haunting legacy of the Nazi gas vans lingers like a toxic mist in the annals of human cruelty. From their deadly inception in 1940, under the guidance of SS Obersturmbannführer Walter Rauff, to their grim efficiency demonstrated by Albert Widmann in Mogilev, these mobile chambers of death cast long shadows across Europe. We are reminded of the words of Simon Wiesenthal, the tireless Nazi hunter, who said, "The only value of nearly 5 decades of my work is a warning to the murderers of tomorrow." His lifelong pursuit of justice compels us to remember those who perished in these rolling death traps, from the ghettos of Warsaw to the killing fields of Rostov. As we bid farewell, we carry with us the weight of this knowledge, a solemn reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink and the vigilance required to prevent such horrors from recurring. The gas vans may have fallen silent, but their story echoes through time, a stark warning against the perils of unchecked hatred and indifference.